Welcome to Lesson 2.4, Adding and Subtracting Rational Expressions. Our goal for today is to learn to add and subtract rational expressions. So before we do that, we're going to look at fractions, because if a rational expression is just a fraction that has an x in it. But remember, how do you do these if you don't have x in them? Well, to add and subtract, you need a common denominator. So in this first question, the common denominator is 12. I'm going to multiply this first fraction by 4. I'm going to multiply this second fraction by 3, top and bottom. So the first fraction becomes 8 over 12. The second fraction becomes 3 over 12. And the bottom stays 12. And the top becomes 8 plus 3 becomes 11. So I needed a common denominator. The common denominator was 12. When they were both over 12, I added the tops and the bottom didn't change. Now this second one, same steps, but it's a little bit different because I'm not going to multiply the first fraction by 6. I'm not going to multiply this by 6 and multiply this by 9. You can probably do this in your head, but what you do is you're saying, well, 9 is 3 times 3. And 6 is 2 times 3. So I need to multiply by the factor that's missing. I need to multiply the first fraction by 2. And I need to multiply the second fraction by 3. And so I get the first fraction is 4 over 18. And the next one is 3 over 18. And I get 7 over 18. So you already knew those steps. The steps are the same here, but they look a little different because our fractions have x's, have variables in them. So what am I going to do first here? I need to give a common denominator. And how do I do that? Well, I multiply. I'm allowed to multiply the top and the bottom of the fraction by the same thing. So 8 and 4 and 6. Well, if I multiply the 4 by 2, that's going to make it 8. And 8 is 4 times 2, and 6 is 3 times 2. So I'm going to have to multiply the 8 by 3. Multiply that 8 by 3, and multiply the 6 by 4. And that's going to make 4 times 2 times 3, 3 times 2 times, so the common denominator here is 24. So I'm going to have to multiply this one by 6. Now what about these x's? Well, I got x3, I got x, and I got x squared. Well, the common denominator, I can make all of them into x3. This one's already x3. How am I going to make this one into x3? Well, I'm going to multiply the first one by x, because x squared times x makes x cubed. I'm going to multiply the second one by x squared. So the lowest common denominator here is 24x cubed. So I multiplied the first one by 3x. I got 9x over 3 times 8 is 24. X squared times x is x cubed plus 6x squared over 24x cubed plus 20 over 24x cubed. And what do I do now? Well, I don't change the bottom. When you add fractions, you just keep the denominator and you add the tops. Well, I'm going to add the tops, but when I add the tops, I can't combine anything because there's no like terms. I get 9x plus 6x squared plus 20. And that's the end. That's the answer to the question. So you give a common denominator by multiplying, and then you add the numerators and keep the denominator. It doesn't change. It's the same as with numbers, just feels very different because we have x's here. Look at the second example. Now this one I'm just going to copy the question here because I want some more space. Now my first step is to give a common denominator. And you might want to add 3 or multiply by 2 or something. And remember, the only thing you're allowed to do is multiply a fraction by top and bottom. I can't add stuff, I can't divide stuff, I got to multiply. So I'm afraid in this case I have to multiply the first fraction by n minus 3, top and bottom. And the second fraction I have to multiply by 2n plus 1. So my common denominator is, and I'm not going to expand it, 2n plus 1 times n minus 3. Doesn't matter what order you multiply them in, it's the same denominator on both fractions. So on the top, though, I will expand. I'm going to expand this. I'm going to go 3n times n, 3n times negative 3. 3n times n is 3n squared. 3n times negative 3 is negative 9n. Do the same on this one. Expand. 4 times 2n, 4 times 1. 4 times 2n is 8n. 4 times 1 is 4. And now I keep the bottom the same because I'm adding. And on the top I add, well, I see 3n squared, and that's my only n squared term. I have negative 9n plus 8n makes negative n. And I only have one constant term, and that's 4. So I only had 2 like terms. My like terms are there and there. So my answer, is 3n squared minus n plus 4. So the step's always the same. Give a common denominator by multiplying both fractions, top and bottom, to make them the same on the bottom. If you have to, you can expand the top, and then add the tops, keep the bottom the same. I'm going to start a video now for page 2.